I'd like to welcome everyone to Charlotte Overdose Awareness Day 2025. Thank you guys all for being here. Like we do every year, if you guys would stand, I'd love to start us off with a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father God, thank you just for the opportunity to gather here today. Lord, thank you for all the memories, for all the lives that this event will touch, for all the lives that we remember, for the pain that people are feeling. Lord, we know that you can hold that pain, Lord. We're grateful to you for just the opportunity to gather, to remember, just to share in the lives of those we've lost and those still battling addiction, Lord. We're grateful to you for each and every person here, that they have a chance. They have a chance to see what you can do in their life and what recovery can look like. And we're grateful to you for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Man, there's a lot of people here. Isn't that amazing? A bunch of people can come together for recovery. I look forward to every year that more and more seats are filled in this place. We're so grateful to Pritchard Church for the opportunity to gather in their sanctuary. Thank you, Pritchard, for always being studious host, for always doing everything that we need and for going above and beyond. And a special thank you for the AV team for their patience, because we never start on time. Today we're gathering here today in honor of International Overdose Awareness Day. I had somebody ask me if I started that, and I cannot take that honor at all. But I wanted to share just a little bit about what I think we all know why we're here, but how it started. I'm a big history person. I love to hear how things started. I love hearing the history of other programs and everything. And so I had to do a little bit of research myself. So what is International Overdose Awareness Day? Well, way back in 2001, there was a small event the Salvation Army in Melbourne, Australia. And I never would have guessed that. I would have guessed that maybe this started, in Kensington, or maybe this started in California, or maybe this event was local to the United States just because of the impact the opioid epidemic has had on the United States. But in Melbourne, Australia, in 2001, at a needle exchange, they handed out about 6,000 ribbons in remembrance of people that they had lost to overdose. This small event continued on for about 10 years until about 2012, that a large nonprofit saw fit that they wanted to continue to raise awareness and to recognize and honor August 31st is International Overdose Awareness Day. And so what that means is that this event went global in 2012. Today, fast forward a little bit, there's over 1,000 events celebrating International Overdose Awareness Day in 40 different countries. Places like Spain, Canada, Norway, the United Kingdom, all over the world, thousands of people are gathering in honor and celebration of International Overdose Awareness Day. We get to be a part of that. I think we get to be a big part of that. As you guys can see, we're one of the largest events in the area, and there's a lot of fellowship out there. But we cannot forget the people that we see on this screen that many of you guys sent to me over the past couple months, that's why we're here. That I don't want to lose more people. And I've got some great facts to share shortly after this. We kind of go through this presentation as this event has grown. But I wanted to go ahead and offer up our first speaker. Introducing that speaker, representing Carolina Center for Recovery, will be Russell Guccio.
Hello, everybody. My name's Russ. I'm owner at Carolina Center for Recovery, Charlotte Detox Center. I want to thank you for coming out and supporting the cause today. I know there's so many of us in here that have been touched by a loved one who's passed away, so it's a sad, but it's also a time to remember, so thank you for coming out. Josh touched on this a little bit, but about 9 years ago we started it here in Charlotte, and to watch it grow over the course of the last few years has been pretty amazing. So thank you for the continued support and your dedication to the event. I want to take a moment to introduce our first speaker. He's a colleague of mine. I've known Frank for the last 7 years now, and a quick little story. Back when CCR first opened, well, a few months after we opened, we were in need of a counselor pretty quickly, and we interviewed this guy, Frank, and we really liked him. And it was a few days before the new year, and he said, you know, when do I start? You know, what time after the new year? I'm like, well, we need you right now. Can you come start on New Year's Eve? So Frank came and started with us on New Year's Eve, and that's the dedication that he started off with, and that's the dedication he brings to the clients and to the company every day. Frank's now our family program manager, where he helps countless families through counseling and guidance and resources. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce Frank.
Thanks, everybody. A little thirsty. My name's Frank. I'm an addict in recovery. Grateful to be here tonight. Thank you. Thank you to so many staff members that kind of gave me props this week, said they were going to come out to see me. So many clients that have come up to say, wow, I can't wait to hear you share your story. This is an event that I'm passionate about. I've supported since I first heard about it. I believe that this is how we start to heal from the opiate overdose epidemic. We grieve those losses, the pictures that we see behind us, but we also remember the good times, the loving times, the relationships that we have with the sons, the daughters, the wives. It's not all bad times, but I learned in recovery that I need to feel my feelings, and for a long time I couldn't do that. I didn't know how to do that, and so I tried to use alcohol and drugs to medicate my feelings, or stuff to kind of fill that void. Now I know that healing involves processing those feelings. And so I'm grateful to be here. I want to share some things about my understanding of recovery with you. In 2015, 50,000 Americans died of an opiate overdose in 2015. The CDC declared it an epidemic. In 2017, 75,000 Americans, just in the United States alone, died of an opiate overdose. Now, a client kind of like spelled out the math for me based upon that. 75,000 Americans in 1 year dying from an opiate overdose is the equivalent of a jet airliner crashing every day for a year. And I like you to think about that, because like when we wake up in the morning and we're reading our paper and having a morning cup of coffee, and we hear about a jet plane crashing, we're like, oh my God. And I think, at that time we sort of became desensitized to that. That number, 75,000, increased every year from that time until last year. 2024 was the first time that opiate overdose fatalities went down. The first time, and I believe it's because of events like this. people showing up and creating awareness that, you know, our communities, our government, our healthcare systems have raised awareness and supported recovery. So thank you for showing up. You deserve a hand. I'm looking forward to hearing our second speaker, Chris. He is a friend of mine, always been my right-hand guy in terms of providing support for the clients that I work with. This guy never says no if I need him for service, so you're going to hear a good guy. I'm lucky to call him my friend. I want to go through a timeline, if I can, about my events that were significant in my life with my addiction and recovery. And because I'm old and because I forget stuff, I brought some notes. Because I had 35 years of recovery and I got 20 minutes to share with it. So I want to tell you, I want to get you out of here on time, okay? I grew up in a real small town in western Massachusetts, and I was sort of a shy, kind of anxious kid growing up. And when I was 16 years old, I was invited to a going-away party for a buddy of mine who was going in the Navy. And I had drank alcohol before, you know, like when I was a kid, a couple of friends of mine, we would raid my parents' liquor cabinet, but it was liquor, you know, hard liquor, and it tasted nasty, so I never drank enough to get a buzz. But this particular time, this party, there were like all the perfect elements were there. There were friends from my school were there, and you know, they had kegs of beer, and it was a nice summer day. And I walked up to the first keg of beer, and I took a red Solo cup, and I poured a cup of beer, and I drank it. And then I had a second one, and something interesting happened. I became Bond. James Bond. I was funny, I was outgoing, and even people who had known me for years said, "What the heck has got into you? Because we've never seen you like this before." And I was like, why did nobody tell me that I could feel this way? It was amazing. And I never forgot that feeling, okay? Like, I chased that feeling for the next 16 years of my life. Like, if I was anxious, if I was sad, take a drink. It was my secret weapon. If I was happy, it would make me happier. And so that was like the breeding ground for my addiction. But what happened to me was, and I think what happens to everybody that uses alcohol, drugs, eventually, you know, we develop this thing called a tolerance for mood-altering chemicals. And how that works is like my brain pushes back at the euphoria, the buzz that I get when I drink alcohol, and eventually, you know, I added other drugs to that because, you know, I'm like, more is better. So I became an amateur pharmacologist, and I'm sort of like mixing drugs to get the right effect, and I would always overshoot the mark. So I developed this tolerance, which just means it takes more of the drug than it used to get the previously desired effect. And when I developed this tolerance, that's when negative consequences started to manifest themselves. So in the beginning, when I drank and used drugs, like maximum benefit, like I'm cool for school, and minimal consequences. But over time, the consequences started to mount up. But my perception became my reality. Like, I couldn't see that. Like, all I'm thinking about is like, wow, this is awesome. And because I could anesthetize my feelings, like those consequences were oblivious to me. It's worth it, okay? Moving on. So I chased that effect for the next 16 years of my life. And through my military services, through 2 divorces, and the end of a music career that I fought long and hard to sustain. But as an addict, I had one priority. Now, I didn't know this at the time, okay? I learned this later on. But as an addict, my job is to find ways and means to get more. And that's what I did every day. And I didn't know that at the time. You know, I was just trying to feel normal. I was trying to feel happy every day. But that was my job. You know, I didn't know what I was going to do that day, but I knew that at some point I was gonna get high. And whatever substance that was, that's just what I used, okay? Just to try to feel normal. That was normal to me. And so by the time I was 27 years old, I had devastated my life. I lost everything in my life that was important to me. And anybody that came in, was in my realm, my circle of life, they were impacted as well. And so periodically, every once in a while, I would get this sense that maybe I want to cut down, you know? Maybe I'm drinking too much. So for like 2 or 3 days, I would like white knuckle it and stop drinking. But this feeling, this emotional stuff would come over me, and I'm like, I couldn't put my finger on what I was feeling, but I just couldn't deal with it, you know? And so after 2 or 3 days, I'd just say, you know, heck with it, and I'd start drinking again. And I never really knew what those feelings were. I couldn't figure out what they were until years later after I finally got sober. But what those feelings were like self-hatred. Like, I hated myself. I hated myself for the things that I had done to my family, the people that cared about me the most, the people that tried to help me, and I let them down consistently. And it's not because I was like this Machiavellian person, like, oh boy, I got you where I want you now. It's like I couldn't stop, and I didn't know how to stop. And so eventually I just, at 27 years old, it's like I knew nothing about addiction. You know, I like to party. And I knew even less about recovery, so I just kind of like tried to seek oblivion. Like I knew I was never going to get better, and so I just kind of gave up. You know, this is not going to end well, Frank. So I just was going to go on to the bitter end. I just didn't care. So you're probably wondering how did this end up in recovery? My very first sponsor said something to me one time. He said that whenever you're living a lie, eventually you run into the truth. Now, bear in mind, like I said, I knew nothing about addiction and even less than that about recovery. But eventually, out of desperation, I reached out to 2 former friends of mine that I hadn't seen in a couple of years. I've been on the run from the law in a couple of states, okay? So I was in California and Florida, and, you know, wherever I went, I took me with me. So, you know, that didn't help, the geographical cure. But I landed back in Massachusetts where I was still wanted by the law, and I reached out to them, and they 12-stepped me, and 12-stepping means they convinced me to go to a meeting with them. And I said, yeah, because I had nothing better to do. Like, I had no friends. I had no family. And so they brought me to a meeting, and recovery didn't work for me. You know, it didn't take the first time. I did manage to get like 7 months of sobriety. And I did that by working Frank's program. Frank's program at that time was I went to 2 12-step recovery meetings a week, maybe. I prayed to a God that I did not believe in, and I just didn't drink. And so after 7 months of sobriety, I decided, you know, I'm going to take a day off from recovery. And nobody's going to know. You know, I'm just going to keep that on the down low. And then after I take this day off, it was opening day at Fenway Park, folks. And after I take this day off, I'm just going to work Frank's program again, and everything will be fine. Well, you know what? This was an important learning experience for me, because after I relapsed and tried to get sober again, it's like I ran into that $10 word called powerlessness, because I could not stop using again. And things just kept getting worse. Like I woke up that sleeping tiger, that's addiction, and the consequences kept getting worse, and the hopelessness kept getting worse, and the overdoses continued. And for a year and a half, I desperately wanted to stop using, and I could not. So after a year and a half, I wound up back in the only place that I could go to, and that was in the rooms. And I went back there with a vengeance, because the people in 12-step recovery, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, they knew something that I did not know, and I wanted to find out what that was. And so I went every day, and I listened like my life depended upon it, because it did. And so after listening to that, in that mindset, I heard a couple things, and one just kind of blew me away. Like, I had been going to recovery. I've been going to AA kind of off and on, Frank's plan, for about 3 years. And after going like every day for a while, I heard this thing that kind of stood out to me, and it was like this. There's one program of recovery offered by 12-Step Recovery. It is the 12 steps. It's not meetings, sponsorship, conventions, dances. It's the 12 steps. And the theory behind that is, if I work all 12 steps, not just 4 or 5, Former colleague of mine said, you know what, if you're drowning in 12 feet of water and you only swim to 6 feet to the top, you're still going to drown. So I have to work all 12 steps, do them thoroughly, that I will have a spiritual awakening sufficient to keep me clean one day at a time. So I was like, wow, okay, that made sense to me. And then a few days or weeks later, I heard the second piece of information that made sense to me. Like, if you want to work the 12 steps, maybe you want to have a guide, somebody that's worked the 12 steps before. And I was like, so that's what a sponsor's for. And so that's when I started looking for a sponsor. And so when the student is ready, the teacher appeared. And so my first sponsor explained the step working process for me like this. The first 3 steps are designed to get right and help me understand that I need a power greater than just little old me to stay clean. So I have to get right with a God of my understanding, or a higher power. Like, I can't do this alone. Steps 4, 5, and 6 are to get right with me. Like, I'm not all there. I'm not all right. So I got some issues that I have to identify and uncover and get some help with. Steps 7, 8, and 9 are to get right with others, the rest of the world. I got issues with the rest of the world. And steps 10, 11, and 12 are to keep right with my God, with myself, and with others. And so in the beginning, like when I got clean, we didn't have like step working guides or anything like that. What my sponsor did was he gave me a notebook, and he said, start writing. And I said, about what? And he said, write about what you did that day, what you thought about it, and what you felt. And he said to start examining your motives before you say anything and before you do anything. So I had a problem with impulse control, okay? I could not control my impulses, and I was consistently, I learned this, that I was consistently hiding a bad motive underneath a good motive. Like, hello, young newcomer female, I'm here to help you get sober, which, that motive was not a good motive, okay? And so I had to take a look at that. And here's the other thing that prepared me for. Like, it helped me kind of take a look at this thing, defenses that I had that served me really well in my addiction. They were character defects. Like, they served me well in my addiction, like dishonesty and grandiosity and judging you and character assassination and talking about you and gossiping, okay? And so when I'm struggling with my self-esteem and low self-worth, and I talk about you and character assassinate you, it makes me feel good about myself. But really, it kind of like, it keeps me sick and confuses me. And my sponsor kind of pointed that out to me, and the other men that I met in recovery that I watched, because I watched them, to see if their actions matched what they said in meetings. And they said that would keep me sick. And so I took a look at that, and I started doing the opposite of those things. The other thing that writing this stuff down every day is, like, I had a lot of information like swirling in my head, and when I put it down on paper, it gave me room to learn new information, and I was seriously in need of new information up here. I had a lot of stuff up here that I needed to get rid of. So I want to tell you there were some early hurdles for me in recovery. Even though I was like motivated for recovery and I wanted it desperately, there was some stuff going on that I had some problems with. When I got clean, it was in the early 90s, so I was a cocaine addict in the 80s. I want you to picture what that was all about, like, because I know that there's some newcomers in here that are hearing about, recovery and sobriety, and they think it's kind of lame. Well, a cocaine addict in the 80s, we were like the epitome. We were the first ones of hip, slick, and cool, okay? And I was too cool for God. And so when I was looking at the step 3 and making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, I was like, man, that is not going to work for me. And this is no lie. I was that guy that sometimes I would hear people sharing meetings about their relationship with God, and it used to anger me. And so I would wait till the end of the meeting when there was this pause in the meeting, and I'd raise my hand and say, excuse me, I'm Frank, I'm an addict. Are we going to ask the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus to keep us clean too? Because I just wanted to get that reaction from the people in the meeting. I thought they'd get in an uproar and start throwing things at me. And really all they said to me was keep coming back, Frank. It's going to be okay. So, fortunately, I had a good enough relationship with my sponsor at that time that I could tell him that, I think I'm going to have a problem with this. And he said, no problem, I got you. And he gave me an assignment to come up with an understanding. Come up with a God of your understanding, okay? And then start praying to that God and asking for guidance. And I realized just now when I said that I really kind of oversimplified this major problem, but it gave me a piece of information that I think is important. And I just want to share that with you. There's no problem in life that there is not a recovery-based solution for. And that was a piece of information that I needed at that time, because I had a lot of problems at that time. I had a lot of stuff coming up in my life that I needed to deal with, and there was always recovery-based solutions for them if I looked for them. So after I got through that hurdle, then I heard about this thing called the 4-step. And it's an inventory. Right? And I'm like, oh, man, I don't want any part of that. Because I had dealt with most of my life feelings of shame and low self-esteem. And I would hear people sharing meetings about 4th step. They're groaning about it like they're giving birth. And I'm like, oh, my God, I don't want to look at myself, because I was afraid of what I would find there. I thought at that time that I kind of screwed up my whole life, and I had a lot of evidence to support that, right? So I was really resistant to do that, but my sponsor kind of patiently pointed out to me that, really up to that point, my addiction had been calling the shots here. It had really been kind of running my life, okay? And he said something also to me very important. There ain't no time machine in Frank. There ain't no time machine in recovery, Frank. You can't go back and change anything you did, but you can learn from the past so you don't have to repeat the same results over and over again, expecting different results. And that was real freedom for me. I could learn from the past, and I wasn't bound by it anymore. So after I learned this information, I then learned a new recovery tool. That was called reality testing my thinking. In the 5th step, I share the insights that I gained from my 4th step with another person, and ideally that's my sponsor. This is something I'd never done. As an addict, and even before active addiction, I had, like I said, poor impulse control, okay? My life was always about acting first and then just kind of deal with the aftermath, I'll deal with the consequences later. And I wasn't good with asking others for help. Number one, I was like, I don't want to bother you, but also, sometimes I was afraid of the information that, I would ask you for help, and then I wouldn't want to do what you said, okay? So I wasn't going to bother asking you for help, but here are my thoughts on that, and this is kind of what recovery has taught me, okay? Like when I want something really badly, like money or a new job or a relationship, I'm like, ooh, I gotta have that, okay? So I'm very emotionally invested in the outcome of what I want, okay? And sometimes I make poor, emotionally charged decisions, and I regret kind of like what I do. But I could walk up to a perfect stranger and I could tell them, like, I'm having this problem making a decision about what I'm gonna do about this situation, and they would say, what the heck is wrong with you? Just do this, because they're not emotionally invested in the outcome of the decision I'm trying to make, right? And that's the objective opinion that I needed, and I still need to this day. So I want to wrap this up by sharing one life-changing statement that my sponsor made to me in about 3 months of sobriety. He realized that the real rewards of sobriety were not, or recovery, I should say, were not just sobriety or getting a great job or a hot girlfriend. He realized, and he shared with me, that the real rewards of recovery were carrying this message of hope, you know, to other addicts in recovery, and especially newcomers. And so in about 3 months of sobriety, he said, you know, one day, Frank, you're going to be able to sit across the kitchen table, because that's where we did our step work, from a guy who's got so many problems in his life. He doesn't know what the heck is wrong with him. He said, not only are you going to be able to tell him exactly what the problem is, like what he's been struggling with all this time, but exactly step by step what it is that he needs to do to change his whole life around. And when he said that to me, I don't know if you remember this earlier, but I told you, like, for years, like, whenever I tried to stop drinking in the past, like, these feelings would come over me, and I couldn't put my finger on what they were. And so for 2 or 3 days, you know, I would like get into a jackpot. I'd get like a car crash, or, you know, I'd black out and do something stupid. And so for 2 or 3 days, I'm like, I'll never do that again. But 2 or 3 days later, I'd do it again. I'd start drinking again and do the thing that had got me in the jackpot to begin with. Well, that feeling that I couldn't put my finger on, once again, to remind you, was that self-hatred. Like, I hated myself for the things that I'd done to my family, to my son, to the people, you know, that had tried to help me for years. But when he told me that I might be able to help one guy, and this is kind of corny and cliche, I get this, okay? But I might be able to help one guy one day. I thought that maybe if I figured out like what I needed to do for me to stay sober, that I could make sense of all that pain that I caused other people, all that self-inflicted pain, if I could figure out what to do to stay sober, and then maybe I could give it to somebody else and help one guy, that maybe I could forgive myself, okay? And so it was that point I really kind of threw myself into recovery, and I started doing things that I'd never really kind of been willing to do before, you know, going willing to go to any lengths. I made those changes and commitments, like, you know, getting up in front of 500 people and sharing my story. I'm an addict named Frank. Thanks for letting me share.
Josh, alcoholic. That's how I know I'm among friends. Frank kind of stole my thunder there with some of those statistics, but I'm going to share them with you guys again because they're actually something to celebrate. For years, I've stood up here and I kind of share these staggering numbers. I mean, they're still staggering, but they're going the right way. So I wanted to share that again. In 2023, we had over 110,000 people who passed from overdose, and in 2024, that did recede down to 80,000, which is a 27% decrease. You know, and 27% might not sound like a lot, but that's 30,000 more people that did not die from an overdose in the last year. And that has something to do with the work that we're doing here. Just like Frank had said, in Mecklenburg County last year, they distributed over 17,000 Narcan dosages, which to me says that we're fighting this stigma. We're fighting the stigma of addiction, and we're winning. We're doing something. You know, for years I would stand up here and I would plead that I didn't want to go to any more of my friends' funerals, that I didn't want to preside over those funerals, but we're making a difference. And speaking of making a difference, I wanted to take just a second to recognize our host as well as some of our key sponsors. I wanted to say a special thank you to Carolina Center for Recovery, specifically Taylor and Ashley, for all of their work here today. Without them, well, without them, you might have gotten signage, but it probably would not have looked as good. But so thank you. Also, a huge shout out to Beyond Sober, who made, designed, and had all of your shirts that a lot of you are wearing printed. Thank you, Jess and Leslie, wherever you are. You guys might have heard of Anchor of Hope. That's all I'll say. As well as Achieve Behavioral Health Services. Thank you guys for being here. This is the first year that we've done some type of sponsorship. In the past, we've kind of just figured it out, but putting the community together. How many of you guys know that connection is the opposite of addiction? And that we had over 35 vendors here today from the recovery community, places that are everything from inpatient treatment to detox facilities to sober livings to nonprofits, all of which are fighting this stigma and fighting the same battle. So special thank you to Carolina Outpatient Detox, to Nova Transformations, and to Smart Recovery for your support in making this event possible. You know, we can't go through an overdose awareness without me personally recognizing some of the visionaries that made this event possible in the early years. The very first overdose awareness was sponsored by Michael's Voice, who was led by Betsy Ragone. Michael is in the mix of pictures that you'll see up here, and Betsy is still fighting that battle on a personal basis, but we are just so grateful for her leadership, as well as Emerald School of Excellence that had a major part. Mary Ferrari could not be here, but just grateful for these people that stood and made a stance here in Charlotte to do something different and to recognize and to continue to fight this battle. We are grateful for you. And again, we don't do this alone. I wanted to take a minute to recognize, if you work in the recovery field, in the addiction field, would you please stand up? Awesome. Thank you, guys. You know, I've been in the recovery field for about 7 years, and let me just tell you, it is absolutely nothing like I thought what working in recovery would be like. So if you are looking to get in the recovery field, you have been warned. It is amazing, but it's not what you think it is. You know, I never realized how much just listening to somebody that maybe couldn't sleep at night, or just answering the phone, or just being somebody who can identify and understand that we've been in those same places. You know, we don't get into the recovery field because it's something we just decided to do. We got to have that passion, and there has to be an identity with it. There has to be that connection. Either we've lost someone or we are someone. And so we're grateful for you guys. Thank you all. Our next speaker was a friend of mine, and I'm just going to say that I am grateful that we did not know each other in active addiction. And he will say the same thing because one of us might not be here. And I don't know how we didn't. It's like we were like 2 streets over from each other, like for years, for a decade or so. Chris's story he's been someone that I ask to speak anytime I have an opportunity to share. It's a story of resilience. It's a story of not giving up. And I know many guys that work with him. He doesn't just stand here and tell you about how his life has changed. He lives that on a daily basis. And I know that because, well, I see him at other places, you know. I'm grateful for you, Chris, if you want to come share with us, brother.
Everybody hear me? Awesome, cool. So me and Josh, man, I'm grateful for him, grateful that he asked me to do this. And we probably did not run into each other because he was at the bar drinking, and I was in some shady place shooting heroin. So we definitely were in the same city and places, but we did not get down with the same thing. So I'm grateful to be here. This is not my jam, y'all. I much prefer to be in a detox facility or some dirty, nasty treatment center, bringing an H&I panel. Sharing in front of all these people like this is not my thing. But, you know, I was taught early on that I say yes, always, you know. I figure it out later. And that kind of goes back to Frank. I appreciate Frank for the kind words. You know, he texts me consistently, sending me guys that are looking for a new way of life and a different way. And I'm just grateful for that. You know, it's guys like him that stay in contact with me and you know, text me and send me guys' numbers and give guys my number that I'm grateful for. You know, I met Frank probably the worst part of my sobriety. You know, when you're sober for a little while, life happens, y'all. It's not all rainbows and sunshine and ice cream, and I love ice cream. But it's, you know, it's life. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good times, and a lot of not so good times. And when I met Frank, it was when CCR was over in Sardis Road. I think they had just started out had been pretty new. And, you know, I had just dealt with the overdose death of my girlfriend at the time. And, you know, because of Josh would have me come there and share in some of the meetings. And I met Frank there and also met a guy that I sponsored there. And it's like, you know, God doesn't make mistakes, because all of that happened at this time in my life where I very easily had the perfect excuse to go back out and get drunk and high again. But instead, because of what I was taught and because of people like Josh and Frank, I decided to go to this treatment center. And at that treatment center, this guy asked me to sponsor him. And, you know, we got busy in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And through that tough time that I was going through, I didn't have a lot of time to really think about it, because I was meeting with him on a daily, or talking to him on a daily basis, meeting with him on a weekly basis. And, you know, that is a big reason why I still stand here sober today. So I'm grateful for these people that I've met. I've got a lot of friends here today, a lot of people that I know in the rooms, and I'm just grateful. You know, I could very easily be that person up there, you know, not the person standing before you. The person standing here is not the same person that I was. You know, people that did what I did and got high like I got high. And people that I got high with, you know, they're just not here anymore. It's just not here. People that put a needle in their arm for almost a decade don't get to stand up here before a group of I don't know how many people and talk about how they've been sober for 7.5 years and, you know, have a completely different life. So, my name is Chris. I am an alcoholic. I identify as an alcoholic because that's what I was taught. I learned about my illness, which is very important for me to learn about what's wrong with me so I can find some kind of solution, right? My sobriety date is December 20th of 2017. crazy to think it's been like 7.5 years. It's just, I've been given this second chance at life, man. It's been different, completely different. So, as far as me, I was a drinker and smoked weed most of my teenage years. I did what teenage people did. I was anti-drugs. I didn't want any of that stuff around me. The guys that I ran with didn't do any of that. And I had goals and dreams and things I wanted to do. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to play baseball. All these things I wanted to do, man. And I just remember that changed in my early 20s. It's as simple as playing basketball at the YMCA, and I really severely sprained my ankle. And I remember getting picked up to get taken to the hospital, and my mom gave me a Percocet. And I'd never had any pain medicine prior. Like I said, I just drank a little bit and smoked some weed. And I just remember I was in such bad pain that I was in the back seat and I took that pain pill and I chewed it up, which is disgusting. But that's how much pain I was in. And I just remember that when that feeling hit me, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was the best feeling I'd ever felt. And I knew from that point forward I wanted to feel like that all the time. And that's what I proceeded to do. I didn't know it when I was in the midst of it, but looking back on it, I can see it now. Things changed from that point forward. From that point forward, I started to, my inhibitions went away. And the guy that was anti-drugs, hard drugs, began to experiment with whatever you got. I became that guy. But my main thing was opiates. And, I'm a product of the opiate crisis. I mean, I am that timeline, early 2000s until me getting sober in 2017. So around those early 2000s, I started doctor shopping. I started going, to different hospitals. I started going to emergency rooms, doing all of that until I got red flagged in the system. And I'm pretty sure I'm still red flagged today, which is a good thing. I don't want any narcotics, but that whole thing ran out. I started writing prescriptions and going into pharmacies and doing that thing. And the two guys I was doing that with both went to prison for a couple years. They did not tell on me, and I don't know how that would have changed my trajectory. But those are the things I was doing just to get what I could get. I had some friends. I mean, they are friends that would supply me, and I did that for a lot of years. I was, Frank talked about tolerance. I went from taking one pill and feeling amazing to taking 2 at a time, to taking 5 at a time. And it got to a point in 2026 when I was living in Ballantyne in my own apartment. I had secluded myself. I had become that lone wolf that people talk about, and I was getting pills delivered to my house, cash on delivery, from this shady website. And this was when George Bush was president. I think he's the one that ended that. But I was getting thousands of pills delivered to my apartment. And I would sell the Xanax and I would take the Percocets. And it got to the point where I was taking 60 Percocets a day. And, I've had people in treatment centers and detoxes come up to me and tell me I'm full of crap. And I'm here to tell you I'm not embellishing because it's not cool that I took 60 Percocets. I would take 20 in the morning, 20 on my lunch break at work, and 20 at night. And this was not to get high, y'all. This was just to feel normal, to get a buzz for 5 minutes. And, it was just a nasty experience. I would wake up with Tylenol hangovers, and it was just disgusting. And I would wake up and crack a beer and take these pills. And, this progressed to, getting introduced to black tar heroin when I was about 28, 27. And, I was still anti-needle, man. So they showed me how to smoke it. Just like somebody showed me how to roll a blunt. Somebody showed me how to make a mixed drink. Somebody showed me how to crush up an Adderall. Somebody showed me how to do these things, right? And, when I took that first hit of heroin off that tinfoil, it was that first pain pill times 1,000. And things changed from that point forward. I no longer was a functional person where I could hold down a job, where I could be a good friend, where I could be a good son, where I could do the things that I was doing previously. It became about whatever I could do to get that next one. And for the next few years, that's what I did. I got in a bad car accident around that time and got a real big settlement and proceeded to spend every single penny on heroin, going to get a couple grams a day and smoking it. And that's just what I did. And, I built up a tolerance for that. A couple years later, I got introduced to the needle. And that's where all things changed, y'all, when I let that that girl who knows if she's still alive today, put a needle in my arm, and that changed everything. This is where I started to live animalistically, and I started robbing my mother, and I started scheming and conniving and doing whatever I could do to get money to get that next one. And I started to end up in treatment centers. My experience is lots of long-term treatment facilities. I've been to 8 of them. I've been to Mecklenburg County Jail numerous times. It was in and out of detox, treatment, and jail for the next 7, 8 years, where I would have these brief periods of sobriety, and then always pick up again. Usually always started with a drink, and it always ended with me weighing about 140 pounds, begging to get into a detox facility because I was out of money, pretty much. And, it was a pretty awful existence. Towards the end there, heroin wasn't doing it for me, so I started voluntarily going to buy fentanyl. Not accidentally getting it in some of my drugs, going to get it from the guy and him telling me this is what it is. The heroin wasn't working anymore, so I started shooting fentanyl, and I did that for a couple years, and that's when I started to overdose a lot. I started just like doing a shot in my car and just waking up like 8 hours later. And I thought, I was just sleeping. I know today that's an overdose, and I could have very easily died there. Overdosing at a stoplight and the cops knocking on my window, like, what's up with you? At a gas pump, because, I go get my stuff and I can't wait to get home to do it. I do it at the gas pump or at a stoplight, stuff like that. And, it was just that constant cycle, where everything, I gave everything away. I had no friends. My family didn't want anything to do with me anymore. I had nothing. And, I got introduced to like 12-step fellowships because I had a bunch of DUIs and stuff, and they told me to go and get my sheet signed, so that's what I did. It was nothing I was interested in. I wasn't interested in y'all's 12 steps or a sponsor or God or any of that stuff. So I just kind of went, and I would go for a couple weeks, couple months, and it would get boring, and I would go do something else, and I'd always get high again. And, this last time, my friends like to make fun of me because I had a couple months of sobriety, and, what I found is I had no defense against picking up that first one. I went to my mom's house. I got some ibuprofen out of her cabinet because I had a headache, and there was a bottle of pills, and I just took them without even knowing what was going on. The next day they found me laying dead in a McDonald's bathroom. I had overdosed from fentanyl in the bathroom, and, luckily somebody found me, or I wouldn't be here today. And, it was on the news. It was in 2017. It was in June. I was on the news. They shut down the McDonald's. They brought the hazmat team out, all that good stuff. I was famous. I'm from Charlotte, so everybody I know saw that. Pretty embarrassing moment, but I'm not the same guy today. And you would think that's when I got sober, right? It's not. I woke up that next day in Mecklenburg County Jail. For some reason, they let me out. Hopped on a city bus. Went right back to getting some more. For the next week or so, I ended up overdosing in my mom's house 2 or 3 times. She found me laying on our kitchen floor, blue, foaming from the mouth, and called the authorities. I'll never be able to make that right, that my mom had to witness that. It's just like such an awful thing, and it was so selfish of me. But I'm grateful for events like this, and I'm grateful for all the people that are here that try to help the community. Without Narcan, I would not be alive today. I've been Narcan a bunch of times, and what happened was, I went to my 8th treatment facility. It was Charlotte Rescue Mission, and there was nothing like special about this treatment center. I mean, they gave me a place to do something different, and I'm grateful for that, and it's free, and you don't need insurance. But there was nothing special about this time. I had been homeless, living on the street for a few months, and I was looking for a bed and some food, and I knew I'd become institutionalized. I knew going to treatment centers, life would get better. I know there's some people in here that have experienced that, where I know if I go to a treatment center, I'm going to put on some weight, I'm going to be separated from drugs and alcohol, I'll be able to get my things together. Frank mentioned car, job, and girlfriend. My friend, we like to call that the newcomer triangle. that is what I did. I'd get sober for a minute, and I would need a job, I'd need a car, and I need a girlfriend, and that's going to fix me. And, it never worked out, y'all. It never worked out. So I went to this treatment center, and something happened in that treatment center. I can't really explain it. I don't really know why I was chosen to be sober and be of use to God and my fellows. I didn't get to decide that. But I was, and that's why I say yes to these things. I don't want to come up here in front of all these people and do this. This is not really, I'd much rather sit down one-on-one with another alcoholic and read the big book. But, I don't get to decide where I'm of service. I pray every morning to be of service, and when people ask me to do things like this, I just say yes and then worry about it after. So, I went to this facility, and I remember the guy that worked there he would tell us there was about 100 people. He said, there's 100 of y'all here. 3 of y'all are going to make it, and a lot of y'all are going to die. And for some reason, I heard that. I heard it. I'd been around recovery enough that I knew all these things, but I just never heard it. And this time I heard it. And I remember making a pact with myself that I was going to be that one that made it. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to get a girlfriend. I'm not here to be the cool guy in rehab anymore. I'm here to save my own life. Almost said a cuss word. But, I got busy, and I started praying. A guy who had no interest in God, and a guy who, I believed in God, but I didn't have, I was always self-reliant. I just remember getting on my knees and praying, sincerely praying and asking for help because I didn't know what else to do. I had tried treatment. I had tried church, being baptized. I tried Suboxone and methadone. I tried just smoking weed. I tried just drinking alcohol. I tried going to a different city. I tried everything, and nothing worked. And I was like, you know what? People like me, they're either dead, they're in prison, or they're in some kind of 12-step fellowship, and they're sober and alive. So that's what I did. I got busy, and I got a sponsor right away, and I started working the steps. And from that point until today is like, I can't even explain to y'all. Like, if I'm going to share any hope, anybody that's in this room, I want to promise you, and I'm not saying this because, I want to be like the worst of the worst, but where drugs and alcohol took me, it doesn't get much lower than that. Like, the people that I heard, the things that I did, the way that I was living, bottom of the barrel, y'all, bottom of the barrel, and I made it out. So if there's people in here that think, they're too old or they've done too much or they're too bad off and they can never recover, that's not true. That's not true. We all have a chance, right? And we don't have to continue to go through this cycle of getting sober and relapsing. I was talking with a guy earlier, and he told me, that this guy that I was sponsoring a couple months ago, who stopped calling me, decided to go back home. They found him dead recently, and that's the story, right? Like I've had several sponsees who aren't here anymore. A couple of them are on this little reel here, and it's just like, it doesn't have to be like that. There's a way out. Going through the steps and getting a sponsor and a God of my understanding has completely changed my life, and today is just completely different. It's just, the life I live is simple. I pray every morning. I go to 12-step meetings. I have a network of friends and a network of people that I call and get honest with, and people that tell me the truth about me. And, I take phone calls, and, I'm a good son. I'm a good brother. I'm a good boyfriend. I am a man of my word. I go to work on time. I work hard. I leave work. I'm dependable. I show up when I say I'm going to show up. And I'm able to be of service and have a purpose today, to be able to help the next man out of the gutter. So, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I probably have ran out of time. I don't even know. Josh is standing, so that's going to be a yes. But, I'm just grateful for this platform and to be able to share my experience, strength, and hope. And to anybody out here that has questions about how this works or how I did it, just come talk to me after this event, or when you see me out and about, just come say hello. I appreciate y'all.
Chris, thank you for your service. I'm not sure, where'd he go? Oh. Thank you for your service, Chris, and thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope, man. Man, I love seeing him in the rooms. As you see, a prop has joined us here on the stage. And I used this last year, and I really enjoyed the clinical intervention that I talked about. And I'm going to kind of start with that, and we're going to go into something else. Our theme this year is One Big Family Driven by Hope. And every year, International Overdose Awareness Day has these kind of two slogans that they use, and I just love the way that they really, for lack of better terms, the way that they drive the program every year and the things that we try to focus on. If you don't know, hope's a pretty strong word for me. When I showed up in Charlotte, I was about as hopeless as you can get. And, for me, that word hope is hold on, pain ends. And that's really all I was searching for when I got here, was for the pain to end. This chair here is, as you see, is purple. There's a clinical intervention, again, called the empty chair, excuse me. And if you're in this room, there's a good chance that you could probably think of somebody that you could picture in this chair that we've lost to overdose. When I think of this chair, and when I thought of it last year, I thought of people like Zach Arnold. I thought of people like John McCardle, Ro Patel, Corey Montgomery. People that I've met over the years, in and out of the rooms and in the recovery field. And there's many, many more. And I know that those, if we're honest, there's some names that are probably scrolling through your thoughts right now. And if you've been here very long, there's probably a lot of names that you struggle to remember, because it almost doesn't seem real sometimes. And something that Chris shared kind of really struck with me. And he said that someone told him someone passed away. And I'm no longer surprised, because when you use drugs in that way, that's what happens. How important events like these are cannot be overstated. How important it is to show people that there is hope and that recovery does happen. As you see here, I got a pair of shoes, specific pair of shoes. And a friend of mine gave me these. A friend of mine that was living at Anchor at one point. And I just used to, just talk to the guys about things they were interested in. This guy's name was Austin. Austin King. And I would wager that someone in this room also knew Austin. Is there anybody here that knew Austin? Would you please stand? Was that 6 people? 7? Now look around you at the people that are standing. If you also know those people, would you please stand up? One of those people, if you know them, could you please stand up? Now, if you look around and if you see one of the many people that are standing that you also know them, could you please stand up? And if you haven't seen somebody that you know, shake their hand and then please stand up. And what does that tell me? One big family. I call out one name of a guy that several of us met years ago. And unfortunately, he was lost to this disease. And 5 or 6 people stand up. And then from there, probably 50 or 60 people stood up. And so on and so on. We are one person away from hope. One connection away from hope. This family united. It's clear to see that all of you guys care. Everybody's here for the same reason. It's 8:30 on a Saturday night, and you guys are here at an overdose awareness vigil. If you're struggling out there, there's a family here for you. If you don't have any hope, borrow somebody else's. If you need a relationship with God, I'll share mine with you. The recovery community is one of the most amazing and powerful communities I've ever been a part of. Probably the most amazing and powerful community I've been a part of. You guys can be seated. Thank you so much. Clap. As we leave here tonight, I encourage you to spend a moment and just look at these pictures. About 90-something pictures. I timed these that the reel is repeated every 13 minutes. And if you know any statistics say we lose one person every 13 minutes to an overdose. So how many times you've seen your loved one come across or a friend that you recognize? And that is our mission, to serve, to share this hope that we've been given, to be a family to one another, to build people up. There's a term called the ripple effect, and the ripple effect is active both in positive and negative things. I think we've all seen the ripple effect of negativity in our lives. Today, I encourage you to focus on the ripple effect of the positivity. How many people can you invite either to a meeting, to church, to dinner? Give them a hug. How many of you know that a hug is the way we communicate in a recovery community? Yes, that is the truth. You know, all of these lives, they had an impact and we missed them. We don't have to lose any more. We can be that person to answer the phone. We can be that person. Thank you, sir. Just to connect. If you guys aren't aware, we do a candlelight vigil. That vigil is held right outside for all the bags that you've wrote your loved ones' names on. And there'll be bags and an opportunity to continue to do that. You know, we were celebrating and fellowshipping and a lot of laughter and a lot of joy, but this vigil is a time it's a somber time, and it's a time to remember. Thank you guys so much for the family that you are and for the hope that you bring to this community. If we'll circle up, we'll close out with the Serenity Prayer. Hardest part of the evening. There's Sydney laughing. Oh. Let this circle represent what we cannot do alone, but we can do together. God, grant me this serenity. Thank you, guys.